At Seedrs, we have two key objectives. Firstly, to ensure that every investor is provided with professional-grade investor protections, so that if the startup that they invest in goes on to become the next big thing, they actually share in that success. Secondly, to ensure that entrepreneurs can easily raise money from hundreds of supporters without having their business crippled by the overwhelming paperwork and hassle that inevitably comes from having lots of individual shareholders. We achieve these two objectives by using what we call the nominee structure. On this side of the screen, I will explain how it works without such a structure, and on this side of the screen, I will explain how the Seedrs nominee structure works. When an entrepreneur raises money on a platform which doesn't use a nominee structure, all the platform really does is introduce investors to the entrepreneur, and then leaves everyone to fend for themselves. There are none of the protections that any normal investor would expect, and most investors don't even get voting shares. Meanwhile, the entrepreneur has to instruct and pay for an external law firm to execute the investment, pay an external payment provider to handle the funds, and sort out all of the company's house and HMRC documentation. After all this, they then have to pay the platform a hefty introducer's fee, sometimes even when the deal isn't successful. There's also no easy way for the startup and the investors to communicate with each other. On Seedrs, the process is much simpler and fairer. Every investor receives voting shares and professional-grade investor protections, all while we represent them as their nominee to enforce their investor rights and take care of the admin. The entire deal takes place on the platform, with no expensive external lawyers or other hidden costs. We even take care of all of the company's house and HMRC paperwork. All of this is included within our one low fee for entrepreneurs and investors, payable only on success. Seedrs also ensures that the startup and the investors can easily communicate with each other through the platform for the duration of the investment. So, to recap, without a nominee structure, the startup has to deal with hundreds of individual investors and becomes overwhelmed by admin, has no easy way of communicating with its numerous investors, and has to instruct and pay for external lawyers, handle all of the administrative paperwork on their own with massive time delay. The unrepresented investors often have no voting shares, no investor protections, and no way of communicating with the startup. With a nominee structure, the startup only has one legal shareholder, Seedrs, to deal with on a daily basis. He has direct communication with its investors through the Seedrs platform and has no external lawyers, and Seedrs takes care of all of the paperwork for them. The Seedrs represented investors all have voting shares, regardless of how much they invest, professional-grade investor protections, including anti-dilution and tag and drag rights, and direct communication with the startup for the duration of their investment.